Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
So, welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we would normally be talking about everything to do with innovation, technology and change. But we're not here this week, despite the fact that you can see us, because we've pre-recorded this show. So we are going to play an interview with Bart Patrick, second part of it, where he's talking about technology in the London market. And then we'll come back and have a quick chat about some of the key themes that he covers. So, Bart, I want to talk to you about you've already touched on it, some of the central modernization, the Blueprint 2. It's changed a lot. It's evolved over time. It's now seems to have got with Bob James in there, somebody who can push through change. I've spoken to him a few times, and he seems to have a no-nonsense kind of approach and wants to deliver something, which is something we've talked about on the show, that there has been a lack of delivery. I just wonder, from your experience or your sense of talking to people, what your feeling is about Blueprint 2, its direction of travel, speed, pace. Do you think it's improved?
It's ambitious, and they always wanted to be ambitious. It's one of these things where I think it's a bit too early to tell. I do genuinely hope, wish, and whatever it is else, that it works, because the market really needs it. I worry about everything that's so complex, so difficult to deliver, has so many working parts and so many people all trying to do things at the same time. That always gives me cause for concern. We all know that well-documented political resistance within the London market, the diversity of existing technologies. You know, the thing is, the way I look on it, the London market's very much like a massive insurer. It doesn't matter if you're looking at one of the huge tier one insurers, they have exactly the same problem as the London market. They have many different systems, they have many different departments. They have dozens of different systems. They have the cultural issues. They have all sorts of different things going on with them. So the change program is not always easy. Not always easy. It's challenging. I mean, anybody who thinks it's easy is actually fairly deluded. But so when you roll that up to a market level, it is comparable to change within a big insurance company. Now, what you're finding with insurance companies now is they're not doing it with the existing company. They're going over here and they're setting up the new entity over here. Yeah. They're all doing this. And I do wonder whether Lloyd's really needs to think about not Blueprint 2, but Lloyd's 2.0. And yeah, I'm looking at the program. It seems really sensible. It's trying to get people moving. It's got the right things coming together, all of those sorts of things. And it's complex, it's difficult. And with insurance here, if I look at a single insurer, their approach is generally, well, we'll try and keep the lights on, we'll try and keep it moving forwards, we'll try and stop everything falling apart, and we'll try and transform over I don't know how many years, and it just is so hard. So in the end they say, well, what is the sidecar approach? Can we build something on the side that really is how we want it to do it? And I do wonder whether Lloyd's needs to really think about that.
No, it's
and the market as a whole, the London market as a whole.
And does that, do you think, there's lots of questions I've got around that, but the first one that occurs to me is, does that give these new entities, challenger brands, if you like, more, I mean, could they be the growth vehicles of the future because of that, do you think? And I'm thinking of people like Mosaic and people like that, you know, who and even Beat and, you know, Carbon and, you know, but they all kind of play we're a tech-enabled underwriting business, whatever that means.
So they exist directly because the others can't.
Yeah.
If the others could, they wouldn't exist because it would be done here and the market would have been eaten up. I think the reticence in doing those sorts of things at the moment is some of the high-profile failures, and they're not failures, they're still ticking over. That's a pretty section. They're not failures. They just don't make money.
Yeah.
A lot of them, the well-documented stuff around in the States, Lemonade, Metromile, all of those sorts of things, where they take extraordinarily high combined ratios. They've got these, well, did have these huge market valuations that have fallen in some cases by 90%.
Yeah.
Not a great advert for these things. But there are a lot of reasons why those things happen. So hype is the enemy of doing. There are lots and lots of reasons why these happen. However, ultimately, what it comes down to is if insurance companies and others could do this, they would have done it. Insurtechs wouldn't exist. Insurtechs exist because it's not being done. Some of them are going to get it right. It's going to take a while. Now, the other thing I love in that is in that whole thing is you think insurance is a get rich quick, you're getting it pretty wrong. And I can't remember who said it, but insurance is a get rich slowly thing. So looking at the Metromile, well, Metromile doesn't exist anymore, it's part of Lemonade, I think it is anyway. But looking at some of these companies that did have huge valuations, have struggled since they've been floated. It takes time. I mean, most of the insurers have been in place for hundreds of years now. So to expect people to change overnight is really difficult. The promise of tech is you can, but the reality of insurance is it takes a bit longer. So I would be keeping an eye on the Carbons and the others in the market. I think everybody should be really looking at how they're doing and how they're challenging and changing things, because something's going to happen, isn't it? So they could be, from what you're saying, yes, they could provide the microcosm to build out the rest of it from, rather than changing the rest of it and thinking that it can all go the other way. So look, in terms of Blueprint 2, I think it's taken a huge amount of work to get there. It looks like a very sensible plan. It's an enormous job to consider this, and things will change. So, I don't know what they could have done differently, quite frankly.
Something I've banged on a bit about on here and elsewhere is my sense that there's a real lack of, because of the way the market is and how distribution works, is that these institutional businesses, insurers, they are a long way from the customer quite often, particularly in wholesale markets. And it feels to me like technology really works well when you're closer to the customer and you can try it out, and then they do something with it you didn't expect, and byproducts happen and all that stuff. And that's perhaps why the market is so slow. But one thing that does surprise me, and I was at an event last night talking to some brokers, and they were saying, it's amazing that in this market we've got such crap technology, from the 1990s, and it's just not changing. And one of the conversations and this is what I've been banging on about, is why don't we have good communications, simple communications technology? At the moment, Aon has got an instant messaging system, I believe, for example, within its organization that works really, really well. And if you talk to anyone from Aon, they say it's fantastic because we trade, we chat, we get new jobs, we do all those things that you do. Same thing in, if you go to Forex markets. It seems to me that when you talked about glue and things earlier on, that communications technology is the glue. But the communications that attach to a lot of these systems, these trading systems, are just terrible. They're not even there in some cases, and I don't know why. I've never understood why they're not there.
Well, there are lots of reasons. Now, the fundamental of you go back in, crikey, 2000, 2001. It's a long time ago. We first started looking at XML messaging, and I remember looking at it thinking, self-describing message? What is this witchcraft? And it's now the backbone of pretty much everything we do. But we've got so many different versions of it kicking around. I just find it incredible. So that whole thing, we spent all that time with the market reform contract, which I thought was a really good idea, actually. I thought that was really sensible. Let's start with something that we can deal with. We now have, and I know they're all going to be coming under EBOT and ECOT, isn't it, eventually, all of this sort of things. And I do get a bit confused with all these changes and all the acronyms. That's London for you. But the underlying technology is XML. It's the same stuff we've been using for a long time. It's a self-describing message. So I have no idea why we haven't managed to, as a market, bring this together. Now, if you look at it, there are all sorts of competing different ideas behind it. Somebody said to me I can't remember who it was. I think it was a really smart observation. He said, in the London market, we don't have the critical mass in order to attract the big players. So, and what he meant was, we tend to do business bits and pieces. So it will be one syndicate will do something, another syndicate will do another thing. They will, again, it's the analogy around an insurance company is very, very similar, which is you'll find that when there is a stress point with an insurance company, the managing director of that line of business will go, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to have to go and find something. So they'll go and find a technology that meets their needs, but is actually a right angle to the rest of the place. It fits that, but it creates that divergence. What's going on? So if you roll it up to a market level, which is not dissimilar to a big insurance company, you've got everybody going in different directions. So this guy was telling me is that we only get small suppliers. We get lots of small suppliers. So I mean, look at the placing platforms. There's a range of these things because everybody comes into it thinking, hey, I can change the market. Hey, I can do something else. So there are lots of really good ideas coming in, but nothing reaches the scale where it takes over. And I think that there's an element of that driving the underlying technologies within London. So somebody will be talking to somebody this week about, I don't know, some AI-driven way of scraping stuff off a bordereau and putting it into the system reliably and making it all happen. And somebody will be going, that's brilliant, I'm going to have that, sign on the dotted line. So that's one thing. Another one will be over there and doing exactly the same thing in a slightly different way, and they'll be signing over there. So then you've got two standards. And I think this has just rolled through the market for many years.
I think you're right, Bart, as well, because that does align with my view, which is that it's many markets and they're all a bit different. So, and they're more different, I think, than we imagine, because everything gets painted as insurance or reinsurance. But when you actually go and talk to people who work, say, in something like crisis management versus property D&F, for example, those jobs are okay, there are similarities. But the way in which those jobs are done are pretty different. But I don't think that's true in banking or forex markets typically. I think there will be some differences, but certainly which was a while ago now, but my experience was, wow, those have got critical mass. You get a system there and it will run globally and people will be talking globally and you can retrofit things and everything. But maybe that's the problem, is that the structure is that you might call it Chubb, but Chubb is a myriad little silos. And that's what chief execs often say to me, is that if you think this is one business, you're very, very much mistaken. And maybe we have to look at it like that and say, therefore, it's not going to be easy to create one thing.
Yeah, but we have one internet, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, it kind of works across all sorts of things. We have many different standards that we all use. We all use 4G, 5G, or whatever it is these days. Can't be the width of the market in order to come up with our version of this.
I think it depends. I mean, my thinking on it is, and nobody will listen to me on this because I know nothing about it, obviously. But what I think is, and I'm going to go for it anyway, is that you could almost use WhatsApp for this, because people already use WhatsApp. In research that we do, they say, well, how do you get hold of an underwriter if they're not there? Well, I WhatsApp them.
Yeah.
And that's the real nudge, which is I really do need to talk to you. I don't want to wait another day for it. But then they're reluctant to always use WhatsApp for the reason that it feels a bit intrusive, perhaps sometimes, and it's not a business tool. It's not the accepted thing. Whereas actually, to me, it seems fair enough. If everybody was using WhatsApp, that would speed up the service. It would speed things up. And later on, you could maybe devise something in which you could trade off the bat, which is exactly what happened with IM in the forex market.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the most dominant, I mean, occasionally people use Zoom and those things, but most people corporates use Teams.
Yeah.
Microsoft. And Teams integrates really well with OneNote.
Yeah.
OneNote is actually really powerful. And then you've got Excel and you've got all the other bits and pieces off the back of it. And the thing about Teams is it's got the diarization, it's got the whole sort of thing. What we need is like Teams for the market.
Yeah.
That technology, I'm going back again now, 2005, there was a product called Groove that Microsoft bought. And we were looking at Groove back then, because it had all this instant messaging. It was almost like a stateless way of collaborating. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
And I think it's looking at it. I'm pretty sure it's the backbone of Teams, and we were looking at that as an insurance application and how it could be used in crisis management, actually. But then you look at that type of thing, and why can't you have a OneNote that has a policy on there that call everybody in, they all work on it, and it gets done? Why not?
No.
And part of it is because that one particular feature will be done by one particular firm. So a software vendor will come up with that. Then somebody else will come up with the diarization side of it. Then somebody else will come up with this other bit and this other bit and this other bit. Now, if it's done correctly and it's built correctly, the whole of this should talk to each other in a modern platform. We're not restricted by computing power. Back then, one of the problems was computing power. How much do you want? Here, look, here's a bucket of it. We'll slosh it over what you need and job done. So I don't think we have that issue. We don't have the issue with speed or processing or data storage or anything like that anymore. That's just not an issue. I do still think that we have a problem with lots of different vendors all going off in different directions, people buying different things. And the theory behind it should be that these things should be designed in such a way that it's not that hard to integrate them. And my experience so far of working with a number of, our ecosystem partners is actually it's not. If their systems are well designed, and we tend to only look at things that have been well designed, it's not rocket science to integrate them and integrate on and on and on and on and on, because we don't have the problems with computing power anymore. So, the long and the short of it is I'm not quite sure why we're not doing it, actually.
Yeah, but I wondered, Bart, with what you said earlier on, which is this, the issue of product development, if you like, and product design in insurance, which is essentially wordings. Because that's problematic, isn't it? I mean, we know that through the BI cases, and we know that, when a big event happens, there's this, like with Ukraine at the moment, there's a sort of, wow, we've got to dust off all those political risk policies where we haven't had a claim in 20 years and find out what they actually say. So I just wonder whether there's something that needs to change around the product development. So not perhaps even products that fit well with technology, but are still insurance products. But the reason I was thinking there's a tension, because you're right, when people try to do that so far in insurtechs, or they get like Lemonade, they kind of start out with, we've got a different product and it's the whole way we've set it up is different and everything else. But within 2 years or whatever, guess what? They're just like a traditional insurer with a gloss of tech on the top, but they're losing a lot of money. And I don't know, just wonder whether it needs to be, the big players need to look at the products.
Well, the way I think about products is from a technology perspective. So how does a product that somebody's designed somewhere fit into my system? And what you find, one of the most common questions we get asked is, do you see products as, so a motor product for, I'm going to use motor, it's the easiest thing to talk about. A motor product for under 18s as being one product, a motor product for 18 to 25 is another one, a motor product for, Land Rover drivers as another product. Well, and lots of systems, back-end systems, require that to be built like that. And you'll find that some of the technologies that have been put, particularly the quote-to-bind ones, require a new one to be built each time. It's just it's a rubbish way of doing things, and it's very expensive. And what it does is it slows down. But some of the huge systems out there, because you have to get into the queue to get stuff done, it can take months to test, deploy, and all those sorts of things. But actually, any modern platform should be able to adapt the product like that. That's the low code bit. That's the bit that you should be able to change, that your customers should be able to change the rating, change the product, add a new coverage, take away coverage, vary a rate, vary sums insured, all these sorts of things. Do it. It's not hard. And then create the documents off the back of it is not hard. If you can't do that, so going back to this, I don't think that is a problem with the product. The product should be able to vary, as in the insurance product.
Yeah.
I think it's a problem with the underlying system.
Yeah, so it's a bit like, I think the analogy might be something, I've been looking recently at the Adobe content platform, and in the design world. And that is amazing because basically, okay, it's a bit of a ball ache to set up the templates and everything else. But once it's done, really very junior people could just enter it in and it produces these beautiful final products. And a lot of annual reports are done like that now. And I'd argue they're massively more complex and potentially more risky than an insurance product is a mistake in your annual report, you know. So you do kind of wonder, don't you, why these technologies are not kind of brought in that are already there, but then it's critical mass again, maybe. Is it worth it?
I think it's an element of fear.
Yeah.
The fear is that you let the IT companies in. That's it.
Yeah,
You're
ownership.
done.
People still want ownership, don't they?
2.5 CIOs later. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I would say that because that's part of what we're about. And the whole thing about it is if that's the way that you're having to think, you've got the wrong technology. If you're struggling with this, and we're very much around the idea of you can, we're not going to fleece you. The technology will go in. You can do what you want to do. You can have a system. You can have a platform that actually does what you need it to do, and you're not going to end up regretting it. And I think that's really added. So what you're talking about here is the reason that the underlying platforms are there. There's such a range of these things. Small, big, medium, you name it, old, new, they're all out there. They're all out doing things. Some companies are running stuff on glorified spreadsheets. And a lot of it is driven by the fear of change. And that fear of change is driven, and we kind of go a bit full circle here, is driven by past history and the, I'm trying to think of the right word here, but the zeitgeist, is that the right word? Could be, yeah, I like complex words, I like German words.
It's good, I like zeitgeist, yeah.
Zeitgeist about insurance.
I'm not so keen on pivot, but zeitgeist I love.
Yeah, that's the word zeitgeist. But the zeitgeist is that it's difficult, it's hard to do, it's going to cost you that's the underlying thing here. And it's not, and if it is, you've got the wrong technology.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, if that attitude changes, it changes everything, doesn't it?
It does, but it's getting over that fear, that risk factor, getting over that, we don't want to do this, it ain't broke, but it is, but we'll put up with it because it's kind of broke, but I can't afford to fix it, into it's broken, I'm going to lose customers, I need to have a better journey, I need to be able to do the digital stuff I've promised my shareholders, let's just get on with it without fear.
Yeah. Thank you, Bart. As always, it's been fun talking to you, and thanks for your view of the world. And I'll see you at TinTech, of course.
Look forward to it.
Yeah,
look forward to it. It's going to be cracking. I'm quite excited. But thanks to both of you for a really interesting conversation. We should do this more often, shouldn't we?
We should, yeah. Hey, it's a really good idea, this online conversations.
Yeah.
It'll never take off.
It'll never take off. No, it's rubbish. And I'll be at TinTech as well, Bart, so I'll see you there.
I'll see you there.
I'm not talking, you'll be glad to hear.
Oh, no, I'll do that for you, don't worry.
Oh, yeah, you do. You are. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Bart. See you soon.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
As always, brilliant to hear Bart speaking about technology. I've just noted down a few things here. Kind of that flexibility in the architecture is obviously key now. And if you don't have that, it seems to be a real barrier to be able to kind of implement change and transformation across the organization. And the conversation you had about communications, fascinating, really, and a bit perplexing why it is still a challenge, I suppose.
Well, it is really interesting because Bart's got the history and he knows what's happened and what's available, and that I found that very illuminating about technologies like Teams that could be applied, because that's what I've thought about things like WhatsApp, and why if it's available, why couldn't it just be applied, because it's in principle no different. And so he's asking the same questions as we are, and rightly so, because that's what people do. They say, we want to do X, and why can't we do it? Because you can do it in other areas, so why couldn't it be done in insurance? And then the flip side of that, of course, is this fragmented market, this all these silos, all these different types of businesses, the the nature of the insurance business, culturally, fear factors, everything else that comes in. And then I think a really good point, which is the critical mass point, which is it big enough really to do some of the things? Now, anyway, so that's all that being said, I think we probably landed there somewhere in the area of saying, but it can be done, which is obviously Bart's new business, Genesis's idea, which is great. It can be done. It should be done at these grassroots level, if you like. But the next question is really, why can't it be done at a bigger scale in some of these more common, generic, but very useful communications technologies? And I think that it should be done. Yeah. And it seems to me that I see them in our research where they work really well. Some of the things off the back of claims portals, for example, like live chat and things, are working really well, but they just don't get adopted.
Yeah.
And competitors say, oh, well, we see, Ben, that's going really well in the research for XYZ company. Do you think we should do it? And I say, yeah, of course you should. Otherwise, you'll be out competed in a while. You won't have the edge. And they said, right, okay, so but we're about 3 years away from doing that, which is Bart's previous point in part one, which is that's not acceptable. And I have to say, I think that when I say it, I said 3 years, that's a long, long time. The world would be different.
Yeah.
So maybe it does still sit with the mindset hasn't changed enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perhaps.
The zeitgeist is that we can do this, but perhaps there is still a mindset thing that needs to be.
Yes, the zeitgeist among people that Bart meets, and he won't meet. I mean, I won't meet the people he meets often, and he won't meet the people I meet. But I think the zeitgeist perhaps isn't quite as geisty.
And with
that, some of those other people. I've made up a word there. It's not quite as there's not as much geist.
Yeah. Good.
Or Zeit even in some of the people I speak to.
That's it. Anybody who's German, you can write into Ben to complain, not me.
Well, because I massacred their language.
Oh well, it's not the worst thing we've done on this show.
I think it's innovation.
I think so too. That's it. Right. We can't tell you what we're doing this weekend because that would be predicting the future, because it hasn't happened and we don't know what happened last weekend and what's going to happen in the future. But I guess we all had a good Jubilee, unless we didn't.
Well, the Jubilee was good. Yeah, that was obvious. That was going to be good, unless it wasn't.
Yes, it wasn't. Well, we'll just play this out, and hopefully it all turns out okay.
Yeah, of course it will. It'll all be all right.
I'm sure it will be. Right, we'll be back live and direct next week. Wherever you're watching, hope you're having a good time, and we shall see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Burgess and Bolton's Weekly Wrap Up.